Rose had been observing the patrons of the Shadow Realm bar, as was her usual routine, when two individuals walked in that immediately caught her attention. There was something different about them, something that set them apart from the regular crowd. The man carried himself with a distinct military bearing, his posture straight and his movements precise. Rose had seen enough soldiers in her time to recognize the signs. He was handsome, in a rugged sort of way, with an easy smile and a confident air. But it was the woman who really intrigued Rose. She was shorter than her companion, with delicate features and a graceful way of moving. But what caught Rose's eye was the hat she wore, pulled down low over her ears. It was an odd choice for the dim interior of the bar, and Rose suspected it was more than just a fashion statement. As the pair made their way to a corner table, Rose focused her senses, reaching out with that subtle magic she'd honed over the years. And there it was, the faint but unmistakable aura of an elf. The woman was trying to hide it, but to someone with Rose's abilities, it was as clear as day. Curious now, Rose watched as the woman whispered something to her companion and then made her way to the back of the bar. She seemed to be searching for something, her gaze intent as she scanned the room. When she reached the far wall, she paused, her hand coming to rest on a seemingly ordinary door. But Rose knew better. That door led to the Shadow Realm side of the bar, the space reserved for the supernatural clientele. For the woman to even see it, let alone approach it, meant she was more than she appeared. With a glance over her shoulder, the woman slipped through the door, vanishing from view. Rose sat back in her chair, her mind whirling with possibilities. Who was this mysterious elf, and what was she doing here? Her musings were interrupted by the approach of the woman's companion. He strolled up to the bar, his eyes landing on Rose with an appreciative gleam. "Hey there, name's Darren. Mind if I join you?" he asked, his smile charming and a little too practiced. Rose returned the smile, intrigued despite herself. "Not at all," she replied, her voice warm and inviting. "I'm Rose. So, what brings a guy like you to a place like this?" As they bantered, Rose found herself studying him more closely. There was something about him, a certain energy that drew her in. Almost without realizing it, she began to exert her own subtle influence, a gentle tug on his emotions and thoughts. It was a trick she'd learned long ago, a way to disarm and distract, and it seemed to be working. Darren was leaning closer, his eyes locked on hers, his expression growing slightly dazed. But just as Rose was about to delve deeper to see what secrets she could glean from this intriguing man, a sharp smack broke the spell. Darren jerked forward, rubbing the back of his head, as his companion, the elf woman, glared at him. "Seriously?" the woman said, her tone exasperated. "I leave you alone for 5 minutes, and you're already under some spell?" Rose raised an eyebrow, more amused than offended. "Jealous girlfriend?" she asked, her tone playful. "Not exactly," the woman replied, her eyes narrowing as she looked at Rose. "He just has a knack for flirting with the wrong type." There was a warning in her gaze, a challenge. This one was protective of her friend, and clearly not someone to be trifled with. As the woman pulled Darren away, Rose sat back, a thoughtful smile playing about her lips. They were an interesting pair, these two. The soldier and the elf, both clearly more than they appeared. She had a feeling this wouldn't be the last she saw of them. And next time she'd be ready to uncover their secrets. After the intriguing pair left, Rose couldn't shake her curiosity. The elven woman's furtive behavior and her access to the Shadow Realm side of the bar hinted at something more than a casual visit. Determined to uncover the truth, Rose made her way to the back, towards the unassuming door that led to the supernatural section. As she approached, the burly bouncer glanced at her, his posture relaxing slightly as he recognized her. "Rose," he grunted in greeting, a rare display of familiarity. Rose nodded, a small smile playing on her lips. "Grim, I need to ask a favor." The bouncer raised an eyebrow, waiting for her to continue. The elven woman who just came through here. What can you tell me about her? Grimm's expression remained impassive. You know the rules, Rose. What happens in the Shadow Realm stays in the Shadow Realm. Rose leaned in closer, her voice lowering. I'm not asking for details, just... Did anything seem off about her? Did she do anything unusual? The bouncer was silent for a moment, considering. Then, almost imperceptibly, he shrugged. She had to surrender a weapon. Silver dagger, looked custom-made, not typical for casual visitors. Rose's eyes narrowed. A custom weapon suggested the woman was prepared for trouble. Anything else? Did she talk to anyone? Go anywhere specific? Grimm shook his head. Nah. She just stood there for a bit, looking around like she was casing the joint. Then she left. Didn't say a word to anyone. Rose digested this information. The woman's behavior sounded more like reconnaissance than leisure. She was scouting the Shadow Realm side, but for what purpose? Thanking Grimm, Rose slipped through the door herself. The shift in atmosphere was immediate, the air thick with magic, the patrons openly displaying their supernatural natures. Rose scanned the room, looking for anyone who might have noticed the elven woman's presence. Her gaze landed on a group of werewolves huddled around a table. They were regulars, part of a pack that frequented the bar. If anyone had picked up on something unusual, it would be them. Rose approached their table, catching the eye of the pack leader. He nodded to her, a sign of respect she'd earned through her work as an information broker. Rose, he said as she reached the table, what can we do for you? Rose slid into an empty seat, her expression serious. I'm looking for information on a woman who came through here a little while ago. An elf, trying to pass as human. She was armed and seemed to be scouting the place. Did any of you notice her? The werewolves exchanged glances, a silent communication passing between them. Finally, the leader spoke. Yeah, we saw her. Hard to miss an elf in here, even with a disguise. She didn't interact with anyone, but she was definitely looking for something. Rose leaned forward. Looking for something? What do you mean? The werewolf shrugged. She was checking out the exits, the layout of the place, like she was memorizing it, and she paid special attention to the back room, the one Silas uses for private meetings. Rose sat back, her mind whirling. Why would this woman be interested in the bar's layout? In Silas's private space, was she planning something? Thanking the werewolves for their help, Rose made her way back to the human side of the bar. She needed to talk to Silas to warn him that someone might be targeting him or the bar. As she emerged back into the main area, her eyes immediately sought out the mysterious pair. But they were gone, vanished into the night as quietly as they'd arrived. Rose frowned. She didn't like unanswered questions, and these two had just presented her with a whole host of them. But one thing was certain, she would find out what they were up to. She hadn't come this far, hadn't built this new life for herself, just to let some unknown threat jeopardize it. She was Rose, the information broker, the protector of the Shadow Realm bar. And she would get to the bottom of this mystery. One way or another. Rose was at her usual spot behind the bar, keeping a watchful eye on the patrons of the Shadow Realm bar. It had been a relatively quiet evening, with the usual mix of supernatural beings and curious humans mingling in the dim, smoky atmosphere. But then, two newcomers walked in, immediately catching Rose's attention. They moved with a purpose, scanning the room with a trained eye that spoke of military experience. The man was older, in his late 40s, with a black leather eye patch over his left eye and a high-tech cybernetic arm adorned with faint, engraved runes. The woman, younger and in her 30s, had the same alert posture and calculating gaze. Rose watched as they navigated through the crowd, finding a table towards the back. The woman took a seat, her eyes never stopping their vigilant scan, while the man's gaze locked onto Rose at the bar. There was something about him, an intensity in his one-eyed stare that sent a shiver down Rose's spine. It wasn't often that someone could unsettle her with just a look, but this man managed it effortlessly. Intrigued and a little wary, Rose put on her most charming smile and sauntered over to their table. "Well, well, look who it is," she purred, leaning against the table, one eyebrow raised. "I thought I saw you eyeing me." The man met her gaze, his expression unreadable. "Yes, I am," he replied coolly, his voice steady as his eye glowed a faint blue. "I see your true form, Rose." A flicker of surprise passed through Rose, but she quickly covered it with a giggle, the sound light and airy, yet laced with a hint of menace. "Oh, you're one of those types, she teased, her voice a blend of mock surprise and playful threat. "Glad you like what you see. Maybe later we can explore more of my true form." She leaned in close, her breath warm against his ear as she whispered, "But for now, let's have some fun." The man, however, remained unmoved. "I'm here for answers," he replied, his tone low and commanding. "Behave, please." Rose tilted her head, eyeing him with newfound interest. She ran a finger down his cybernetic arm, a sly grin playing on her lips. "You're no fun," she murmured, "but I do like a challenge." She stepped back slightly, her eyes narrowing as a faint crackle of energy shimmered around her, the telltale signs of a spell forming. But the man just smirked, crossing his arms. "You'll have to try harder than that," he said, a hint of a smile in his voice. "Your spells won't work on me." Rose's grin widened, a flash of sharp fangs gleaming in the dim light. "Oh, I'm not here for magic tricks tonight. I'm here for you." She reached up, her hands trailing along his shoulders as she leaned in close. "Trust me, I can be quite persuasive when I want to be." Her voice dropped to a sultry whisper, her breath hot against his neck. "What's the matter? Afraid you might enjoy yourself?" Before she could react, he reached into his pocket, pulling out a silver bracelet. With speed and precision that spoke of extensive training, he snapped it onto her wrist before she could pull away. Instantly, Rose felt her magic drain away, her form wavering as it was stripped from her, leaving her in a more human-like appearance. "What? What have you done?" she demanded, her voice trembling with a mix of anger and fear. She tried to pull away, but his grip held firm. "Just leveling the playing field," he replied, his tone icy. "Now, we're going to have a little chat." Rose glared at him, her green eyes flashing with defiance. "You think this will stop me?" she hissed. "I may not have my magic, but I don't need it to make you pay." She leaned in close, her breath hot against his ear as she whispered, "I always find a way." He didn't flinch. "Then I look forward to it," he replied, his gaze hard as steel. "But for now, you're coming with me." He nodded to his companion, who stepped forward with handcuffs ready. Rose struggled, but without her magic, she was no match for their combined strength and skill. As they escorted her out of the bar, Rose could feel the eyes of the other patrons on her, the silent weight of their surprise and curiosity. But even as they drove away, Rose in the back seat, with her eyes fixed on him with a burning intensity, she knew this was far from over. As the Shadow Realm bar faded into the distance, Rose allowed herself a small secret smile. They thought they had her, but they had no idea what they were truly dealing with. Rose sat in the back of the car, her mind racing as she tried to process what had just happened. The silver bracelet on her wrist felt like a lead weight, a constant reminder of her current powerlessness. She glared at the back of his head, silently willing him to turn around, to give her a chance to read his expression. But he kept his gaze fixed firmly ahead, his posture relaxed but alert as he drove through the quiet streets. It was his companion who finally broke the silence. "You know, Rose," she said, her tone conversational but with an undercurrent of steel, "we've been watching you for a while now." Rose's eyes narrowed. "Is that so?" she asked, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "I'm flattered." The woman chuckled, but there was no humour in the sound. "Oh, you should be. We don't take an interest in just anyone." "And what, exactly," Is your interest in me? Rose demanded. It was the man who answered, his voice low and even. You're a key player in the shadow realm, Rose. You have connections, influence. You know things that most people, mortal or otherwise, could only dream of. Rose felt a chill run down her spine. How did they know about her role in the shadow realm? That was information she guarded closely, information that could be dangerous in the wrong hands. You seem to know an awful lot about me, she said, trying to keep her voice steady. But I don't know a thing about you. Hardly seems fair. The man's chuckle was dry and humorless. Life's not fair, Rose. You, of all people, should know that. But since you asked so nicely, the woman interjected, we're part of a special task force, let's say. We deal with threats that most people don't even know exist. Rose's mind was whirling. A special task force? Dealing with supernatural threats? It sounded like something out of a bad spy movie. And you think I'm one of those threats? She asked, unable to keep the disbelief out of her voice. Not necessarily, the man replied, but you're connected to them. The Shadow Realm Bar is a hotspot for all kinds of supernatural activity, and you're right at the center of it. Rose felt a flicker of pride at that, despite her current situation. She had worked hard to establish herself as a major player in the Shadow Realm. But now it seemed that very position had put a target on her back. So what now? She asked, trying to sound more confident than she felt. You're just going to make me disappear? Because I can tell you right now, that's not going to go over well with certain people. The woman actually laughed at that. Please, if we wanted you dead, you'd be dead. No. We have something else in mind for you. The car pulled up to an old, abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town. Rose looked out the window, taking in the dilapidated building with a sinking feeling in her stomach. As the man and his companion got out of the car, Rose took a deep breath, steeling herself for whatever was to come. She stepped out of the car and followed her captors into the depths of the warehouse. She couldn't shake the feeling that this time she might just be in over her head. The safe house was tucked away in a forgotten corner of the city, a small, unassuming building shrouded by dense trees. The place held the scent of old wood and the faint traces of countless missions. Inside, Gunnar led Rose to a worn-out chair in the center of the room. She looked around, her nose wrinkling in disdain as her green eyes took in the dimly lit surroundings. Charming, she muttered, folding her arms over her chest, the silver bracelet still clasped tightly around her wrist. Ashley shut the door and stood by it, arms crossed as she watched Rose with a mixture of suspicion and curiosity. So, the man said, breaking the silence as he leaned against the table across from Rose, why don't you tell us what you've been up to? Before Rose could respond, the man leaned in close, his voice low and meant only for her. I'm Gunnar, leader of the pack, and as long as you're working with us, you'd do well to remember that. He straightened up, his cybernetic hand flexing almost unconsciously. Now, back to my question. What have you been up to? Rose smirked, a glint of mischief in her eyes as she settled back in her chair. What makes you think I'll tell you anything? She asked, raising an eyebrow. Last I checked, I don't owe you a thing. Gunnar's expression remained stoic. No, but you're going to because you don't have much choice. Start talking. She sighed dramatically, twirling a strand of red hair around her finger as if bored by the whole ordeal. Fine, she huffed. You want to know what I'm doing here? Why I'm luring men to the Shadow Realm Bar? It's simple, really. I'm bored. After centuries of being hunted, controlled, and manipulated, a girl needs a little fun. The interrogation continued, with Rose revealing that she was simply looking for entertainment and didn't mean to hurt anyone. She claimed she just wanted to live her life without interference. Gunnar and the woman were unconvinced but ultimately decided to let her go with the magic-dampening bracelet still on. If you step out of line, you won't have another chance. You'll be dealt with, Gunnar warned. Rose smirked. We'll see about that, she said, before turning and walking out of the safe house, her red hair disappearing into the night. As Rose stepped out of the safe house, The cool night air washed over her, a welcome relief from the stuffy tension inside. She took a deep breath, her mind already racing with the implications of what had just happened. Gunnar. The name echoed in her thoughts, alongside the impossible feat he claimed to have accomplished. The Demon King defeated by a mere mortal? It seemed unthinkable. And yet, there was something about Gunnar, a quiet intensity that made her believe it could be true. She glanced down at the silver bracelet encircling her wrist, a constant reminder of her current powerlessness. The magic-dampening device was a nuisance, but not an insurmountable one. She had dealt with worse in her long life. As she walked through the quiet streets, her mind turned to the Shadow Realm bar. Silas would be wondering where she was, and she needed to let him know she was all right. But more than that, she needed the comfort of the familiar, the security of the place she had come to call home. She couldn't risk using her magic, not with the bracelet still on. But she had other ways of getting around. Hailing a cab, she gave the driver an address a few blocks from the bar. It wouldn't do to lead anyone directly to her sanctuary. As the city lights flickered past the car window, Rose considered her next move. Gunnar and his Echo division had made it clear they would be watching her. She would need to be careful, to play by their rules, at least for now. But Rose was nothing if not adaptable. She had survived worse than this, had played the long game before. She would bide her time, gather information, and when the moment was right, she would strike. The cab pulled up to the curb and Rose stepped out, tossing a few bills to the driver. She walked the remaining blocks to the Shadow Realm bar, her senses alert for any sign of being followed. As she approached the familiar door, she felt a wave of relief wash over her. This was her territory, her domain. Here, even without her magic, she was in control. She stepped inside, the comforting scents and sounds of the bar enveloping her like a warm blanket. The patrons barely glanced up as she made her way to the back, too engrossed in their own conversations and deals. Silas was in his usual spot, his eyes widening as he caught sight of her. "Rose, where have you been? I was about to send out a search party." Rose managed a small smile, sliding into the seat across from him. "It's a long story," she said, her fingers absently tracing the silver bracelet. "But I'm back now, and we have work to do." Silas leaned forward, his expression serious. "What happened? Are you all right?" Rose met his gaze, her green eyes glinting with determination. "I will be. But first, I need you to help me find out everything you can about an organization called the Pack, and a man named Gunnar." Silas raised an eyebrow, but nodded. "Consider it done. But Rose, be careful. I have a feeling you've stumbled into something big here." Rose's smile was grim. "Oh, I know. But they've stumbled into something bigger." She leaned back in her seat, her mind already whirling with plans and possibilities. Gunnar and his team thought they could control her, could use her for their own ends. They had no idea what they had unleashed. Rose was the survivor of Eldermi. She had faced down demons and dark mages, had built an empire out of secrets and favors. And she would not be tamed. Not by Gunnar, not by anyone. The game was on,